It began in a cramped apartment above a laundromat, where the hum of machines became the background music of ambition. The walls were thin, the paint was peeling, and the air carried the faint scent of detergent mixed with cigarette smoke. In that space, a young man named Adrian spent his nights staring at a second-hand laptop, the glow of its screen reflecting in eyes that had seen little more than disappointment. He was not born into wealth, nor was he gifted with connections that could open doors. What he had instead was hunger, a relentless desire to rise above the noise of obscurity and carve his name into the marble of success. Adrian's first venture was hardly a venture at all, buying old electronics from pawnshops, tinkering with them, and reselling them online for a small profit. It was menial work, unpredictable at best, but every sale felt like a brick laid on the foundation of something larger. Still, money slipped through his fingers faster than it came. There were nights when dinner was nothing more than stale bread and black coffee, and yet he kept working, convinced that the line between rags and riches was thinner than most people dared to believe. What changed everything was not luck, but a realization. He noticed patterns where others saw randomness. The market, chaotic and unforgiving, had loopholes, cracks in its armor that few had the patience to study. Adrian began to see business not as a battlefield but as a game, one governed by rules that, once understood, could be bent or even broken. He spent sleepless nights poring over forums, old books, and obscure financial reports, tracing the way money flowed like a river diverted by unseen hands. To him, the ultimate cheat code wasn't dishonesty or fraud. It was knowledge, the kind so sharp it could cut through the illusions that trapped others. The turning point came when he stumbled upon a failing local clothing store. The owner, worn down by debt, wanted nothing more than to close the doors and escape the weight of unpaid bills. Adrian saw not failure, but opportunity. He offered a fraction of what the store was worth, just enough to tempt the weary owner into walking away. Within weeks, Adrian rebranded the shop, shifted its stock online, and turned it into a marketplace for second-hand designer wear. What others saw as junk, he reframed as vintage luxury. The gamble worked. Orders poured in, first locally, then from across the country. The store that once dragged its owner into despair became Adrian's stepping stone into legitimacy. But success was not a straight climb. Rivals appeared. Established retailers dismissed him as a fluke, a boy with no pedigree trying to play in a league too grand for him. Yet Adrian thrived in their underestimation. He reinvested every penny, expanded into multiple niches, and created an ecosystem that fed off itself. Each business he launched seemed to unlock another door, another path forward, as though he had cracked a code invisible to others. Still, the price of ambition was heavy. Friends drifted away, unable to keep pace with his relentless drive. Relationships crumbled under the weight of his obsession. Nights turned into mornings without sleep, the lines under his eyes deepening like shadows carved into stone. He told himself it was worth it, that one day he would look back and see every sacrifice as part of the climb. Yet, in the silence between deals, when the world outside his office went still, he sometimes wondered if he had traded too much of himself in pursuit of a dream that refused to pause. Years later, Adrian stood in the lobby of a gleaming skyscraper that bore the name of his company in polished steel letters. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and investors gathered like moths drawn to the flame of his success. They spoke of him as if he had been destined for greatness, as if he had followed a map laid out by fate. Only Adrian knew the truth, that his rise was not the work of fate, but of finding the codes hidden in plain sight, the shortcuts others overlooked. From rags to riches, the journey had never been about money alone. It had been about seeing the game for what it was and daring to play it differently. To those on the outside, he was a genius, a visionary, perhaps even lucky. But deep down, Adrian carried the quiet knowledge that there had been no luck, only an endless hunger, sharpened into the ultimate cheat code of business, the refusal to play by the limits others accepted as unbreakable. Adrian's empire did not appear overnight, though from the outside it often seemed that way. After the success of the rebranded clothing store, he discovered a dangerous truth. Momentum, once gained, was as intoxicating as it was perilous. He chased it feverishly, unwilling to let a single opportunity slip past. The world saw his smile in photographs and thought it effortless, but they did not see the countless moments when the weight of debt, risk, and doubt nearly pulled him under. The next step came when he noticed the inefficiency of small suppliers who lacked the means to connect with bigger markets. Warehouses full of unsold goods sat like dormant treasure, waiting for someone to claim them. Adrian became that someone. He negotiated deals that left manufacturers relieved to offload their stock, then funneled those goods into online platforms he controlled. The profit margins were slim at first, but he understood something his competitors did not. Scale was the true multiplier. If he could dominate volume, he could own the game. Not everyone was pleased by his rise. Established players moved quickly to shut him out. They blocked access to suppliers, spread rumors about his credibility, and even attempted to undercut him with predatory pricing. Adrian countered not with brute force, but with cunning. He built relationships directly with factories overseas, bypassing the middlemen who sought to squeeze him. He didn't fight their game, he rewrote the rules. The rivals who dismissed him soon realized they had underestimated not just his ambition, but his resilience. As his businesses expanded, Adrian began to resemble the very figures he once despised, the powerful men in tailored suits who moved markets with a whisper. Yet, he never forgot where he came from. In boardrooms, he carried himself with a sharpness honed by years of scarcity. He spoke little, listened much, and struck deals that seemed impossible until the ink was dry. People called him ruthless, others called him brilliant, but in truth, Adrian was neither. He was simply unwilling to accept the limits others lived by. There were moments of near collapse. Once, a critical shipment was delayed at a foreign port, threatening to bankrupt his entire operation. Investors circled like vultures, ready to declare his empire a mirage. For 2 sleepless weeks, Adrian scrambled, negotiating with customs officials, leveraging favors, and even selling personal assets to keep his business afloat. When the shipment finally cleared, it became a story told in hushed tones among entrepreneurs, how the boy from nothing had stared bankruptcy in the face and walked away richer. With every crisis survived, his legend grew. Adrian understood that image was as powerful as profit. He cultivated a persona, the visionary who saw opportunities in ashes, the strategist who bent chaos into order. Behind the mask, however, was still the boy from the laundromat, hunched over a battered laptop, desperate for one more breakthrough. Wealth poured in. Towers bore his name. His companies spread across industries: fashion, logistics, tech startups, even real estate. He created jobs for thousands, yet whispers persisted that his rise was too sharp, too fast, almost unnatural. Some called him a genius, others a cheat, though none could ever point to where the cheating occurred. The truth was more unsettling. Adrian had discovered that the real cheat code in business wasn't deception, but the courage to see what others refused to see, and the relentlessness to act on it before anyone else. And yet, with the empire built, Adrian often stood alone at the top. Nights stretched long in glass-walled offices overlooking cities that glittered beneath him. He could buy anything, command anyone, but the silence reminded him of all he had lost along the way: friends, loves, even fragments of himself. Success had been the prize, but it was also the cost. Still, when he looked at his skyline, he felt the old hunger stir. He had gone from rags to riches, not by accident or inheritance, but by finding and playing the ultimate code. To the world, it was a miracle. To Adrian, it was simply the game. After his first fortune in clothing and wholesale goods, Adrian turned his eye to technology. He saw that the future was not in physical storefronts but in platforms, digital spaces where millions could trade, sell, and dream. He poured his profits into building a marketplace app, sleek and addictive, something that made even the most reluctant sellers feel like entrepreneurs. It was a gamble that nearly broke him. Developers drained his funds, bugs plagued the launch, and investors whispered that he was overreaching. But Adrian refused to fold. He lived in his office during those months, sleeping on a leather couch while drinking enough coffee to numb his veins. When the app finally stabilized, it exploded in popularity. Competitors who had mocked him suddenly scrambled to imitate him, though none caught up. With tech came notoriety. He was no longer the nameless hustler from the laundromat. He was now the man to watch. Interviews, magazine covers, and invitations to private gatherings with billionaires followed. Yet in those rooms of chandeliers and crystal glasses, Adrian often felt the sting of alienation. He spoke their language but not their tongue. They had inherited empires. He had built his from ash. For them, business was tradition. For him, it was survival. The rivals grew bolder. One in particular, a polished magnate named Victor Hale, became Adrian's shadow. Hale was old money, bred in boardrooms, and he despised Adrian's rise. To Hale, Adrian was an interloper who had not paid the proper dues, a disruptor who bent the system too easily. Their feud became the quiet war of whispers and moves. Hale cut off Adrian's supply lines and logistics. Adrian countered by acquiring an entire shipping company, making himself untouchable. Hale tried to crush his tech ventures through lawsuits, and Adrian, anticipating the attack, buried him under patents and airtight contracts. Their duel spanned years, and though neither spoke of it openly, every insider knew the truth. The empire that survived would belong to the man who understood the game best. But victories demanded sacrifices. Adrian's oldest friend, Malik, the one who had once helped him haul boxes of second-hand clothes into storage units, grew resentful. Malik had believed he was a partner, but Adrian, consumed by ambition, had left him behind. Their final conversation ended in silence, Malik's eyes cold with betrayal. Later, when Adrian stood in his glass tower, he sometimes thought of Malik and wondered if losing him had been the real price of his first million. Romance, too, slipped through his fingers. There had been Elena, the woman with laughter bright enough to cut through even his darkest nights. She had loved him when he had nothing, but as his empire grew, so too did the distance between them. He missed anniversaries, forgot promises, and replaced affection with ambition. One evening, she left without raising her voice, without accusation. She simply said, "You've already chosen Adrian. And it isn't me." Her absence carved a hollow space in his chest that money could never fill. The years hardened him, but not beyond recognition. At times, when he returned to the neighborhood where it all began, he felt the ghost of the boy he once was, the boy with the peeling walls, the battered laptop, and the dream that seemed impossible. He would walk those streets anonymously, listening to the buzz of laundromats and corner stores, reminding himself that he had not cheated fate, only outplayed it. By the time Adrian's company became a global titan, he was both admired and feared. Journalists called him the architect of the new market. Rivals muttered his name like a curse. To the public, he was the living parable of rags to riches, proof that anyone could rise. But those who had walked closer to his fire knew the truth. His cheat code had not been luck, nor deceit. It had been vision sharpened by desperation, and a refusal to surrender where others bent. Still, in the quiet hours, Adrian sometimes wondered whether the game had ever ended, or if he had simply become another player trapped inside it. His riches were unquestionable, his power undeniable, but the boy from the laundromat still lived within him, whispering that no mountain was high enough, no empire vast enough, no victory final enough to silence the hunger.